Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here, and I was a little too eager to wrap up the introduction. I didn't read the description for the Exile. So, the Exile, no one steals from Reckoner Lord, and yet I did. I had my reasons. So this episode is I'm going to try and do some gameplay, but I do want to talk about why I like this DLC a lot, what my first impressions of it were, and then some additional information that I got about it. And then we will go into the legacy, but I want to try to set some ground rules for it. But I figured at the very least I should be reading the introduction. And of course, as we always do, this is quite unique. I think you get an idea in terms of how unusual this particular DLC is going to be, just by virtue of the starting items that you get: 7 trace cards, an escape plan, 7 stolen years, and 7 stolen decades. So we are going to start the game. We're going to make the character, and before we go too far into the legacy, I'm going to talk a bit about why this is so exciting. Sunset, time to go. All right, this is the story of Marty Mountain, the Exile. So, we start with employ, make use of something, address opportunities, run operations, or convert years to cash. In this case, you'll notice that there are a number of other cards available. So we have Aspect Weapon, reach for the book, it is a weapon, Brecht. Opportunity, unrealized potential. Connection, we read that we ought to forgive our enemies, but we do not read that we ought to forgive our friends, Cosimo de' Medici. Lore, knowledge of the invisible arts, I can use it to attract followers, to perform rites, to open the way to the mansis, to seek my ascension. Comfort, there are joys that even money can't buy. This is not numbered among them. And proof, with the right papers, you can prove anything. Now, it is actually, I haven't played the Exile since they did the new UI, so I'm going to have to find a place for these. We'll put this up here. Trace, a betraying clue that my pursuers might recognize. Reckoners appear more quickly and are more powerful when there are more traces on the board. The foe himself can appear once there are at least 5. We have an escape plan. Now this has, that doesn't have an aspect. An escape plan. I need to go somewhere I'll be safe, at least for a little while. So that has aspect opportunity. A stolen year. A year of generously donated life as entered in the cindered tally. Stolen lifespan, years from the lives of others. Bought, stolen, or extorted. And a stolen decade. 10 years of generously donated life as entered in the cindered tally. And 10 points of stolen lifespan. So for those who are unfamiliar with Exile, it is worth remembering that this, we're in this nice place now because Weather Factory have supported this game for so long. It's still getting attention. There are still people who are coming to it, and it's worth remembering that there are going to be people who are approaching Cultist Simulator for the first time who haven't had the benefit of seeing these DLC come out at the time that they first did. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about where this came from and what my experience was of first playing it. I believe with the release of the Medium, the Ghoul DLC, the plan was that would have been the last of the DLC. Now there had been plans for other legacies that were talked about. I think there was one that was related to sort of being having a family and the pressures of family relating to sort of the pursuit of the occult in the game. And that never was formally announced as a DLC. This was always just one of those things that if you read carefully in an interview or you look at certain comments, there were some ideas that were clearly being kicked around in terms of stories to tell inside of the secret histories that might have been a subject for a DLC, but ultimately were never pursued. And I can't recall exactly what the circumstances were to lead to the creation of Exile. But you'll notice when you take a look at the DLC for Cultist Simulator, Exile has a considerably higher price than the other DLC. And that's essentially because I would argue that Exile is essentially Cultist Simulator 1.5. All of your familiar kind of cards, your health, your funds, all of the funds will show up. But even if you just take a look at the bottom here, right, all of the traits are different from before. And this DLC addresses a lot of the common complaints about Cultist Simulator. So in Cultist Simulator, you are someone who will face the pressures of the mundane world. You have to have a job, you need to, basically keep food on the table, a roof over your head. But even though you face mortality in the form of sickness and, the loss of health, the Suppression Bureau coming after you, as long as you're able to manage things, you essentially have an infinite amount of time to pursue your goals. You don't get old and die. And that's clearly different from Exile, or maybe not clearly different if you've never played it before, but the first thing that you will notice about Exile is you do not feel safe at any point. Exile plays very fast. In fact, if there is a complaint that I've heard about Exile is that it's too tough at the start. But I think that's probably right, because I think a number of people have had the experience of Cultist Simulator where you invest so much into a run and then you encounter some other kind of, fail state. You either find something that you haven't encountered before and you fall to it, or perhaps, the fascination gets out of control. And it feels really bad that you've invested so much time into a run only to sort of to face defeat. Now, there's no guarantees in Exile either, but I tend to notice that if you are going to fall in Exile, you are going to get annihilated very quickly. And if you are able to sort of reach kind of escape velocity, you're probably going to be okay. You may not necessarily get the ending that you're looking for, but chances are you're going to be able to see the thing through. Now, the funny thing is that I very, very vaguely remember how I have beaten this before. I think I have defeated the foe, and I believe there was also something related to the Lionsmith that I pursued. But yeah, needless to say, I have got all of my work ahead of me in terms of remembering all of that stuff, which is why it's really exciting to do the Exile. So number one, this is very exciting because this is an opportunity to just sort of to not take anything for granted in terms of Cultist Simulator, other than the idea that there are still verbs and nouns. Everything is new. Everything is open. You do not feel safe in this at all. And in fact, the way that I had originally sort of described Exile was, it was almost kind of like the James Bond of Cultist Simulator DLC. You were going to lots of different locations, and there was lots of action. And it actually turns out when there was an AMA related to Exile. I remember Alexis, the writer, was talking quite a bit about the Netflix series Ozark, which I've not actually seen all of, but I've seen a few episodes of, and I'm kind of familiar with the premise. And certainly, it's pretty clear to see, once you know about Ozark, it's pretty clear to see what the mapping is, but that wasn't a reference that I had. In fact, usually following Cultist Simulator, I tend to find a lot of really good shows or books as a result of the conversation around it. But the idea here very much is that you've taken this very precious thing from someone who deals in it, and they are unhappy about it, and they have considerable resources to be able to get their things back and to punish you for your actions. So you had better have a really clear idea in terms of what you need to, or of what you're going to do. I think this is probably the best thing that Weather Factory has done. I think Weather Factory's assessment is that this is the best thing that they've done. In their overall careers, I think that would be a fair statement as well. But of course, we're still waiting for Book of Hours. So the last thing that I wanted to mention before we jump into the DLC was I also remembered during the production of Exile, there were a couple of tweets that were put out asking for details about cities in Europe. Basically, if you lived somewhere and you had an unusual fact about a city, they wanted to hear from you. And the specification was, not the sort of stuff you can find on Wikipedia. And I think this probably goes without saying. I'm pretty sure people who write video games are capable of searching Wikipedia as well. But there are lots of little details about European cities, the majority of which I don't even realize are in the DLC to sort of reference or mention. But this is another thing that actually is quite exciting about the DLC to me, is just knowing kind of the research and the detail that went into it. In a game where so much of the experience is based on text, just to have those fragments and the places that you're exploring just have that little degree of authenticity, right? The part that's so fun about the secret histories is, just a twist on history for the things that are different, but also just maybe learning a little bit more about the world that we live in on our own, right? We've talked a few times about how some of the characters are actually historical figures, and it may not be clear that they are until you go and do some looking. So that was, I thought, a really nice touch, which, again, if you were someone like me and following the development, that's probably not new, but if you are new to Cultist Simulator and you haven't tried Exile, these are all things that, to me, were exciting. So number one, I was a Kickstarter backer. I got the Perpetual Edition, so I'm sure Weather Factory lost money on me as a result of this particular, DLC. But it is absolutely worth playing. I think if you're new to Cultist Simulator, play the game, get to the end of a legacy, and if you are saying it's a good game, but I don't really know if I quite have the heart. Dancer is cool and all, and I had fun with that, but if it's just sort of an adjustment to the formula of the previous ones, maybe I don't quite have it in me to do the medium or priest. If you're at that stage of your enjoyment of Cultist Simulator, do yourself the favor and try Exile, which is what I'm about to do right now. So, as usual, all the tips still work, right? So if we wanted, I could try and put a stolen decade in. Well, that doesn't work. Trace obviously doesn't work either. So really, we only have one thing to work with, and that is the escape plan. And so let's jump in and work with that. From under their noses, my old Confederates are out searching for me. I hear their whistles and their finger snapping at every corner, and no wonder, given that what I've just stolen, but enough was enough. A smuggler contact in Avignon, Monsieur Georgiou has a proposition for me. So we're heading to Avignon. And we're going to take some time to sort out all of the verbs. Like I said, this is a chance for me to learn things again too, so I do want to make sure. Right behind me, this one knows my face, and I know his. The wheel turns. Oh, let's arrange this the way that I want. So the wheel turns, the sun crosses the sky, night pursues it. And far enough and fast enough. I have more than enough cash for the journey, but I might need to travel light. Leaving a city will shake off your pursuers, but they'll find you again eventually. Avignon. A smuggler contact in Avignon. Monsieur Georgiou has a proposition for me. Once you leave the current city, this will never be available again. So we can't do anything with our current verbs. Let's time pass by. A hostile move. The assassin is moving against me. Direct Reckoner attacks cause wounds if they succeed. They usually succeed, unless you provide a card to defend yourself. You can also try to bribe them with a decade, although they may get greedy. And then there's our cash. So in this case, intention, a road or its end. So we can take a location, we can take an ally, we can take a destination. So location and destination are distinct. And exhausted. With a little time, this will recover. Prepare to depart. I will need cash to pay my way. Cash, considerable sum, enough to open a door, fund a project, or excite avarice. So it's again worth taking a review. In the case of Exile, I think it is fair to say you should not take anything for granted. So in this case, it's worth recalling the different kind of the different aspects, especially as relates to what you might take for granted in the from the previous game. So this is asset, something that won't object to being owned. Cash has the aspect knock. The knock permits no seal and no isolation. It thrusts us gleefully out of the safety of ignorance. The knock is the principle that opens doors and unseams barriers. Portable, an asset that might travel with you. Forge, fire I once read, is the winter that warms and the spring that consumes. It has worth. If I had to convert this into cash, how much would it be worth? Well, 1 cash. It is supplies, finite, like a lifetime. Supplies are consumed when used. And Grail, hunger, lust, the drowning waters. The principle of the Grail honors both the birth and the feast. Packing, I may need this. You can take anything portable with you, but it will lengthen your preparations. So you can already see in the very introduction of this, and this is absolutely something that you will focus on this playthrough, is the idea of staying ahead of your pursuers, but also converting your stolen goods into something valuable. And this is actually something that I failed to appreciate when I played the game the first time. So stolen years just have the aspect stolen lifespan, as opposed to asset, portable, worth. It's here somewhere. So a lot of my playthroughs were actually focused on preserving the decades and years as much as I could. So here I've stolen 77. Whereas I actually think now that the point of the DLC is to convert your stolen years and decades into cash. But the trade-off is that as you do this, the more stuff you have, the more you are, the longer it takes you to go. So it's all well and good to sort of steal the cash. It's all well and good to sort of take, you can take the stolen decades, you can take the stolen years, but all that this has earned me is something that I can't buy groceries with, and some very powerful and very angry people coming after me. So the problem is twofold: cashing this out, and also doing so in a way that it's not going to take me. So in this case here, if I had to, let's say that I converted this into, let's say for the sake of the argument, that I had somehow converted this into cash directly. If it's 10 seconds for every item, if I had 77 cash to take with me, that'd be 770 seconds, which is about, I guess, 12 minutes or so. We'll say 13. And because they're doing attacks every 40 seconds, I'm not gonna be able to survive something like that. So let's pack. I'm not gonna try bribing the attacker. I'm going to see if I can slip away in time. Farewell. And there we go. The traces are gone. The pursuer's gone. Monsieur Georgiou has invited me to dine in the rooms he keeps by the Palais de Pape. Georgiou, the smuggler. A melancholy and philosophical smuggler of rare cigarettes, rare poisons, and rarer weapons. Sleepy Avignon, where the mistral blows. Monsieur Georgiou has invited me to dine in the rooms he keeps by the Palais de Pape. I'm not very good with French. I'm doing my best to learn, but I'm gonna need some time. All right. So this is the other thing that's really fun about Exile, and is it Ian Livingstone, I think, Anyways, a significant figure in the history of sort of games. There's a fun story that Lottie Bevan, the producer and writer and overall, I don't know, fixer at Weather Factory. So apparently she shared a train trip with him, and apparently he was the one. It wasn't this particular train trip. I think the train trip involved an apology for Lara Croft, but the apparently the contribution from this individual was mentioning a map, and how having a map would be a good idea. And this is apparently the reason why that great reveal of the Mantis is in Cultist Simulator. But of course, in the case of Exile, the really noticeable feature is the map of Europe. Now, of course, there are definitely some very suggestive little drawings on the map. I like the Turkey one. There, we will definitely know why Turkey has what it has. But yeah, there's definitely little hints of things on the map. But this is also just sort of fun. You're able to sort of trace your journey. I think one thing that would have been nice, I can't remember if they do this or not, but I thought one thing that would be so nice is if you kind of get to see the lines of where you've gone. I don't believe it does it, but like I said, it's been a while. But we're now sort of, we don't have the immediate pressure on us. And so now what we're going to do is try and see if we can achieve some of our immediate goals. So short term, we are going to want to turn some of the stolen years and decades into something that we can take advantage of. We're also going to want to stay one step ahead of our pursuers. So in this case, we've got a few items here. The sun crosses the sky, night pursues it. We remember employ, we've got travel, again, if we've got location, ally, and destination. In this case, this is an aspect, a place of residence. I'm here for now, so we can't use that in there. And then we've got reconnoiter. It's cold old world out there, but I know a few tricks. So as always, if you are looking for guidance in a game like this, and for me, Exile is pretty much like playing Cultist Simulator for the first time all over again. You can always click to see if there's any cards you have available, but for now, we need to finish Reconnoiter, and we'll see what we have available. So, a knife secret. I'm no adept, but I've had to kill a few adepts in my time. You pick things up as you go. And relinquish. Someone took a shot at me as I got out with the years. I'd almost forgotten. I think this introduces the wounds. I believe I will be able to pay to get that fixed. Reconnoiter Avignon. Walk the city, seeking opportunities. Sometimes this will create a trace. So the idea here, right, is that we're on the run. We've gotten away from our pursuer, but taking certain actions is going to draw attention. This is usually the point where, you know, you'd have the scene and then the camera just slowly moves to the background where someone's, you know, looking over at you, and then they make a note or they go and make a phone call. So we'll see if we can avoid that consequence. But for now, we're just going to let things play out and see what cards we have available to us at the time. I've changed the dressing. I can move well enough. I could wait for it to heal, or heal it with stolen years if I'm in a hurry, but it'll take a whole decade, and it'll certainly be noticed. So, as you can see, this has a really long timer on it, 11.99. 7 of these will end me, so 4 knock, 4 winter. I don't feel the need to heal the wound right away. In this case, we don't have an immediate threat, but that may change. As always, it depends what circumstances bring up. Communication. I have excellent reasons not to contact anyone from my old life, but that may yet change. So for relinquish, it is an empty space that makes the bowl useful. A reckoner corpse, proof of victory. This is going to make my foe very upset. Stolen lifespan. So that, I think, would be Right, stolen life is more easily sold by the year than by the decade. I have the tools to make the necessary changes, but I must be very careful with my pen strokes. She who comes before the sun looks unkindly on sloppiness. Decades cannot be sold, years cannot be used to heal wounds. Years cannot be converted back into decades. So essentially, making change is closing the option of healing a wound. Now, I'm not finding myself short on years, so we're going to avoid that. So relinquishing a wound, I believe it will... yeah. Could use a stolen decade to heal my wound. Through this, though this may attract reckoners, or I have identified a source. If I have identified a source of vitality, I could use that. Of course, if I have time, I can just wait for the wound to heal. So now we don't have the option to study health. So if we're going to look for vitality, we need to find another way of getting that. Heal a wound with a stolen decade. The years must be burned in silence just as the dawn begins. The Madrigard is picky about that, and the wound dressed with the ashes. You'll need a dawn opportunity to complete this. Now, I'm not going to do it, but it's nice to get a little bit of information in terms of the different actions that you can take. Alright, so if I relinquish cash, sell, abandon, extirpate, surrender. So apparently cash doesn't do anything here. Can't put lore in there. And a trace, betraying clue that my pursuers might recognize. So apparently we can do something to get rid of a trace, but I will leave that aside. So, just as a reminder, it's helpful to take a look. Oh, so we can employ a knife secret. The deadliest of weapons. No reckoner is ever foolish enough to pass into the higher levels of the Mansis. To draw the attention of the true long, or their masters, would invite annihilation. But my foe has some traffic with the hours of struggle and conquest. He enjoyed certain protections. Boldness draws attention. This will destroy the current obscurity and create a trace. So I'm okay not drawing attention to myself quite yet. I think I want to try and get a few things done first. So travel, we don't have any options for. Relinquish, we already went over our choices, so let's move on and see what happens inside the next few verbs. The wheel turns, the sun crosses the sky, night pursues it. At the end of each cycle, reckoners may also enter the city. This is more likely if you've created a trace, and much more likely if you've created more than one. Alright, walk the city seeking opportunities. So we've got opportunities, an underworld connection. I've been around, and when you get around, you get to know a certain kind of professional. That's just how it is. So we're able to work, in this case we've got an underworld connection. We would purchase this underworld connection with years in this case. It's an opportunity and price in years. Some things are too precious to buy with money. Fewer things are too precious to buy with heartbeats. Here's someone who will only accept payment in the currency of the cindered tally. So I think I'm actually going to take a notebook out for this. I don't have one immediately with me, and I've only got a little bit of time left for this video, so I'm just going to I've got some graph paper beside me, so I want to see what these different connections will get me, because it's been a while. This is also kind of fun because you get a chance to see how I go through a game. It's still kind of artificial to do it on something like YouTube because I am conscious of the timer and if I sit in silence for half an hour, that's really not going to work for anybody. And I do need to say that for a DLC which is all about pursuit and danger, I'm going to take this very slow. But in this particular case here, this is a chance for me to sort of show what my thought process is to try and figure out new things. So in this case, we'll use the stolen year for the opportunity. And Recognitor always has the danger of the trace, right? So we don't necessarily want to abuse this, but I am going to take the 30 seconds just because we don't necessarily know what the Underworld connection is going to get me. And clearly we know that we can get out of... well, actually, we can't get out of Dodge because I don't have an escape plan. Alright, old and happy far-off things. Moth finds light in the dark, and so do I. And done. So an underworld connection, a mutually beneficial arrangement with relevant professionals. This is an asset. Knock 6. It's a connection. we read that... Oh, sorry, we've already read that. 8 edge, 8 moth, and assists deception. There is nothing more deceptive than an obvious fact. Arthur Conan Doyle. Anything with this aspect can be used to defeat traces. Okay. I have excellent reason... sorry, we read that. And temptation, escape. I've stolen a fortune in years from a reckoner lord who trusted me. He'll pursue me across continents, but even his reach has its limits. Achieve 7 obscurity to send a taunting message to your reckoner foe, disappear forever, and win the game. Now, as you will know from other legacies, you don't necessarily stay with the the temptation or the ambition that you started with. But this is a good place to start, particularly the sending the taunting message. Security through obscurity. If your obscurity reaches 7, you can send a taunting message to your reckoner before you disappear forever. So here it is here. This might be the only defense against a reckoner lord. It might be no defense at all. So we could communicate. So we could arrange an initial meeting. If we go send cash ahead, I might need to leave in a hurry. I can prepare the way by sending funds ahead to a possible destination. Of course, if I never go there, the funds will be lost. I actually didn't know I could do that, so that's good that I checked that out. We are at the end of our time, but I kind of want to see what happens at the end of Old Unhappy Far Off Things, so we might run a little bit further. Provoke my connections. I'm not the only one with enemies. If I arrange a public rift with this contact, I might gain official connections instead, or I might just annoy my current contacts. This will usually work, but sometimes fail and leave you with no connections and a trace. Okay, use underworld connections. Add Forge 6 and space to begin a counterfeiting operation. A seaport opportunity and space to begin a smuggling operation, or a stolen year to compete in illegal fights. Nasty, but as long as I keep some years on hand, I shouldn't suffer too much permanent damage. Any failed challenges will result in a wound, which you won't be able to heal until the operation is complete. Edge aspect cards are often useful when competing in illegal fights. Okay. So I don't have a location anyway, so I don't think I want to do that quite yet. So the sea, forge, or a year. Arrange an initial meeting. A meeting with Monsieur Georgiou, a smuggler. Georgiou has a proposal. There are treasures for the taking in the Chateau Terrasson. There is also the possibility of a monster, but he points out, after all, where there are no monsters, we generally invent our own. He begins to illustrate this with a reference to recent European history, but fortunately, at this point, the wine arrives. The family of Duc de Terrasson has long been rumored to breed monsters. They've employed French and German deserters to guard their mist-shrouded chateau. Begin a caper. Get in, get the goods, get out. I don't think it's ever been that simple. So we have a few things that we can put towards it. So if we add cash, we can add a wound. As much as I want to follow through on this, I think I'm going to wait to see what else comes up. Trace. It's hard to pass through the world and leave no footprints. Reckoners use traces to find you. On city-seeking opportunities, sometimes this will create a trace. So we have an opportunity to purchase a profane weapon. It's much easier to find firearms now since the war. If you have a profane weapon already, this will replace it, which may be useful if it's exhausted. Seems to me like I want to do this. Now, this is the last of my cash, so I am going to need to try and find a way of getting some work done. And this is our first trace, so we don't need... It's not a hair on fire moment yet, but we do need to make sure that we've got some kind of a way of getting out of Dodge. Okay. Let's listen to this. Oh, that doesn't look good. A restless longing has me. I feel I want to do something. What exactly? And done. Profane weapon. A prosaic weight. So it's an asset, 2-edge, weapon, worth, and profane weapon. A fine weapon, but a worldly one. Ordinary weapons can harm most of your pursuers, but not your foe. Just one slip. I've been careful, but not careful enough. A trace on the board will sometimes draw reckoners. And so, within 50 seconds, we actually have a reckoner that we need to worry about. And on that note, I'm going to have to leave you, especially because it is very late tonight. So, thank you very much for watching. I realize that this has been a little bit of a little bit more talky and a little bit less action for the Exile Legacy. It'll be like this for a bit while I find my feet, but I think we'll have a good time with Exile. I'm certainly looking forward to it. As a reminder, Tuesdays are still sort of an off day for me. Now, I originally was intending on recording something to put in those places, but I did not have the time to do that, so that will still be empty. I am going to try and get some videos recorded for Wednesday through Friday, but that's going to have to happen at another time. So, as I mentioned, my intention is to run ahead, and if I need a break, I will announce it on a video sort of in advance. But if it just so happens that a video doesn't get uploaded on the usual Wednesdays through Fridays, it's probably because I ran out of time, a little bit like the Exile. Usually what happens in those cases is that there is a video that is available and uploaded, but it isn't yet processed, which means that it's only available at something like 240 resolution. And generally I tend to find that that provokes more complaints than, I think for the most part, people don't understand that it will eventually become a high-definition video, so I usually just leave the videos aside and put them up. But again, with that sort of stuff, I'll do my best to signal in advance when I think those kinds of problems are coming up. For the most part, I'm going to try and record as best as I can on time, and I'll just try and make sure that my day-to-day gets sorted out. So, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the future. See you on Wednesday. Take care.